Hi and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday the 29th of January. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and today we've got part 2 of my interview with Lucy Harrison, the soft skills guru. Some of you will have been long-term listeners and will be aware that I've started this podcast on a product called Anchor. So when I started, I was working out how do I do it? What do I need to do to get a podcast out there? All these different things. How do I actually get it out into different podcasting areas? And how do I potentially make some money out of podcasting? And I discovered Anchor. And the answer to every one of my questions really was simple, and it was Anchor. Anchor provides a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distribution your podcast if you're interested in doing one. Best of all, it's free. It's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. I can do it on my phone. I can do it on the laptop. It's fab. And now Anchor can match with great sponsors who can advertise on the podcast and hopefully support and pay for some of the stuff that's going on. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing by reading this ad. Anchor will pay me for doing this advert. So the way I use Anchor, and a recent thing that I've started to experiment with, is using the contributor section where someone rings in and leaves a message. You'll have heard earlier on maybe one of my podcasts, people's contributions and questions and queries and thanks. So it's a great way of using it, really. Over the time, I've recorded directly into the app. I've recorded and uploaded. I've recorded on my phone and uploaded at the same time. So it's really flexible. It's for you to do it when you want, where you want, and however you want. So if you've wanted to start a podcast and make some money out of it, why not go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using it. Okay, I can't wait to hear it. Yeah, and I don't know if I spoke to you about this when we spoke the other week, and it's an area of things that I've always used, and when I discovered it, I thought it was fantastic. Was the disc profile, where. And the way that I describe it is you get those two opposite ends of the spectrum where so you have the 4 character traits, and if you are at the opposite end to another one, it kind of, when you realise what they're like and you realise what you're like, you can realise why they think you're a dickhead and why you think they're a dickhead. And then you can go, It's not because they are a dickhead, it's because they work differently to me and think differently to me. And then you can actually sit there and go, right, okay, what can I do to change the way I am so I can work in harmony with them? Whereas quite often some of us will go, right, let's try and change that person. It's simple things. They try to go there and go, right, well, they need to be more like me. And then you're on a hide into nothing.
If you think about the kind of projects that we have to work on now and the kind of complexity, the ambiguity, some of the problems we're working on have gone beyond being wicked. They're so gnarly that there is no answer to them, and there probably never will be. But we have to keep trying. And you think about some of these projects, and the only way that we're going to solve them as humans, go back to that bit right when you introduced me at the beginning, the bit about humanity. One of the things we're really good at humans is being creative and innovative, and thinking differently and trying new things. But the way you get that is by having different people working together and doing different stuff. I'm sorry, I completely forgot to turn my phone off.
Don't worry.
Oops, I'll just put that on silent briefly. And so that stuff is so, so important to make sure that you have got those opposite ends of the spectrum, understanding that their different perspectives are really important, and by sharing those different perspectives, you're more likely to come up with something different, something unique, and a better way of doing things.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because we've been using some agile techniques and Scrum techniques within some of our work at the moment, and in fact, I've got the things I've got here, and the old Scrum estimating poker cards, and it's one of the things I remember from my training. The most valuable thing on the estimating thing was around the fact that you've got it. It is really a much better way to size pieces of work by using these cards, and you're sitting around and you're holding up the card that has whatever, how big or small or whatever you think it is, and the important things aren't the ones where everyone says it's a 5 and everyone says it's a 30 and everyone says it's a 1. The important ones are where somebody says it's 100 and someone says it's a 1, and then you go, well, hang on, why do you think it's 100 and why do you think it's a 1? And those conversations usually result in one or both of the people going, oh, I thought it was this, I thought it was this, and it was maybe something in between. Do you mean the actual thing you're talking about, you don't know enough information about it because you've got two possible different views of what the solution to that might be. And that's the thing, those opposites and those opposite ideas are brilliant. And I go to Raymond Voulings as well, who had on the show talking about the Idea DJ, where he's got talking about cross-industry innovation, where taking industry ideas, turning them on their side, plugging them into that, and then you've got, and it's all about all of the ideas, two ideas create one. The use of an Xbox controller in submarine missile systems. It's kind of the gaming industry, that two industries you think complete there, but the tooling's the same, and those sort of things, that innovation, those ideas are from differences. It's the Wright brothers arguing with each other, and that's how they worked out the solutions to things. And people think they were arguing. It's kind of, well, no, that's how he's got a different opinion to me. We argue about it, and then we work out a better solution together.
Yeah. And if you don't tell people that things are not working, then how can you change them?
Yeah.
How do people know to change them? But that comes back to that piece about, psychological safety, trust, care. Do you feel able to have that conversation, or is somebody going to turn around and go, oh, shut up? Get on with it.
It's an interesting...
Just do your job.
Because psychological safety...
And that's what creates the culture.
I've seen psychological safety as a phrase used in the last 12 months, probably, maybe 18 months. And it's not one I've picked up on prior to that. And I kind of saw it and saw a little bit of writing about it, probably a LinkedIn article or something like that, and kind of immediately went, well, yeah, obviously, if we don't feel safe, in a safe environment, whether it be work, whether it be home, whether it be friends, wherever, or out and about, if you don't feel that you can be you, and I think that's the thing, it's about being you in whatever environment, that without repercussions on that. And I'm not on about, right, I just go to work in my pants because that's me, but it's it's that whole thing.
I've got that image now.
It's quite all right.
Thanks, Nigel.
Your eyes, you can't survive that. If you've got, I think it goes back to that. I'm not bothered as well, because for you to care, you need to feel safe as well. I think you need that safety to be able to be passionate and say, we're doing the wrong thing for this. We need to be doing this.
Yeah.
But if you feel you can't do that, you end up muting that passion, don't you? And just...
Well, I think it was the first time I came across it was it was a big Google survey when they looked at what makes an effective team. I think it's 2018 it was published. And they were looking across all these different teams, all these different agile project teams across the organisation, and saying, okay, what makes some of them effective and some of them not so effective? So let's analyse it. We've got all these different ones. Let's have a look. A huge amount of data. And when they did, it was by far and away the single most important thing in the most effective teams. The single most important thing was psychological safety, and it was leaps and bounds ahead of anything else. The others were around clarity of roles and responsibility, clarity of purpose. Do I trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do? That accountability piece, those kind of things. But this psychological safety was absolutely way ahead of any of those. And it got kind of then picked up by, there's quite a few different writers. Amy Johnson is one of the big ones on it. But it's really been in this last 4 years that the phrase has taken off. But it's one of those things where you go, oh yeah, well of course.
Yeah.
Of course that's right. Yeah, the teams I've been able to bring my whole self to are the ones that, the good bits and the bad bits and the angry bits and the excited bits. Those are the ones that we've got the most out of. Those are the ones where we've all actually been working for each other and for the team, and putting ourselves to one side of it.
It draws to. It's a funny thing. It's to me, and I've felt this, is my natural me has changed the way that I present it in my work in the past 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Going from being someone who I think I should be, someone who I would like to be, to more like the person who I am. I'm a bit sweary. I'm a bit stupid. I mess around a bit. I'm a bit belligerent at times, but hopefully I can enjoy. But I'm trying to be more me, and I found the tension by being not me over the years is built up to a big manner last year when I had some real problems last year, and I think that's, for me, I think that fits in with where that psychological safety can create that tension. And I also have a theory that, and I fight against the phrase, but it's used, midlife crisis, is us as adults going from when we were kids doing the things we'd like to do when we're in our early 20s, and then we bow to peer pressure, we bow to organisational pressure, we bow to the work world of society and what we should be like and how we should be. And then you get to the point where you go, hang on, there's a finite length of time here. I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy not being me. I don't enjoy just saying what I think. And I don't mean that in just a free for all, but being the person who you really are. And I think it ends up with us going, right, I'm going to wear what I wanted to wear. I'm going to buy a motorcycle. I'm going to buy a Porsche because I wanted a Porsche when I was 25. And now I can afford. I can't, but now, maybe you can afford one, and I know it's the cliche, isn't it, of the getting the soft top sports car, but that's the vehicle that someone wanted when they were 25, and they never bought it because they thought, well, I better buy a Fiesta, just because I can't. If you look at the YouTubers who are making lots of money and they're in their early 20s, they're spending their money. they're not conforming to what is expected of them. And that conforming, I think, puts that psychological safety. If you don't feel psychologically safe, you will conform more to something that's outside of your normal behaviours and character.
It's interesting though to hear you talk about that, because one of the things I hear is that there's this almost this moment and this realisation for you of going, actually no, sod that, I'm going to be me. And actually you're very lucky to have gone through that. I'm not going to ask you about it, but I think you're incredibly lucky to have gone through that and therefore have this confidence and this courage to show up as who you are. And be able to be a bit vulnerable about that and go, do you know what, this is me, like it or don't.
I'm not.
And that's a tough thing for a lot of people.
And it's still hard for me. And it's something I want, it's something I try to do. Actually, doing this podcast part of doing that, I like my own voice. There you go. I like talking to people. There you go. One thing I always wanted to do, and for a long time, I wanted to try and be a speaker and do things like that. And that's and this is my vehicle for trying to get through to that. And I've had opportunities to do it, and hopefully I'll get more and do training and things like that. But never had and conformed because I've gone through the roles I've gone to, and then you've got the house position and the risks that you can't take to maybe do the thing you'd want to do. And yeah, but you think about it, you see some like incredibly successful comedians. I'm watching Ramesh Ranganathan the other night, who I think is fantastic. He used to be a maths teacher. From what I gather, he didn't enjoy that. He did that because he thought it would work, and I don't think he thought he was very good at it either. You're probably better than he plays for the comedy. And Greg Davis, similar sort of thing. At a point, you go, that's not for me. And maybe it isn't. It may not be as common as people do, but quite often we end up, for certain project management, every project manager I've interviewed on this podcast so far haven't planned to be a project manager. They kind of either fell into it or saw it and thought, oh, I'll have a go at that. They didn't grow up wanting to be a project manager. And so you end up a little bit of osmosis into a role and end up doing what you're doing. You don't necessarily, it may not be your calling. And it's an interesting... I wonder whether... How do you get psychological safety, though? Because you can't just say, everyone, don't worry, you're okay. We are going to be psychologically safe in our organisation. HR have got a policy on psychological safety. We'd like you all to read that. And if you don't read it by tomorrow, we'll send you another email reminding you to read the policy on psychological safety. And then we'll tell you off and report it to your manager if you haven't read the policy on psychological safety.
If you haven't, you will read this email and you will make each other feel safe.
Morale will increase or morale will increase. Otherwise, beatings will be added extra. I know. Sorry to anyone who's listening who's a HR person. I'm not trying to be horrible. There is that. It's an extreme example of something like that. But it is. How do you do it? How do you create that safety within an organisation? There's a really easy, simple question. You 3 words answer for that.
Thanks. Yeah. Do you know, if I knew that, I would be
mad.
I would be having Porsches, like several Porsches on the drive, I think. I bring it back to the bits that you can control. And I always try and bring it back to each conversation that you have. We recently did a series of courses with an organisation with just this in mind. It was all kind of messed up by the pandemic, so we had to do a load of the training online, which, you try and do soft skills training online. It's really, really hard, especially with a load of project managers who don't want to be there. Like, way too much, I don't want to talk about soft stuff. So we were doing this work with them about looking at every conversation that you have. How do you choose to have a different kind of conversation? How do you recognise how you are showing up to a conversation and the impact that has? So how every time that I show up in a conversation with my partner, with my team, with my clients, with my kids, it will have a major impact on how they respond. So it's about choosing to have a different kind of conversation, choosing to show up differently, and every person making that choice, and then choosing how I respond. So how do I, when something happens to me, am I just going to react and do my normal, don't you dare speak to me like that, as I tend to with the kids, but instead choosing to take a moment, use that little gap and respond in a different way, respond positively or respond curiously, and those are the things. If you can help people do those 3 things well, which curiously is all about what the book's about, but if you can help people do those 3 things well, then you make a really good start to helping that happen. People need to understand why, and that can be a really hard concept. Why would I bother? Why is it important? So that is quite difficult for them as well. The conversations I have work. I tell everybody what to do, and they go off and do it. Why do I need to have a different kind of conversation with them? So sometimes that is the hardest part, the hardest nut to crack. But then it's looking at those 3 things.
Yeah, I suppose, again, I always jump back to the disc because I use that as my linchpin for a lot of things, is that when I started listening to it, and you talk about dealing with the kids, the story that I heard in there, and the story a different one I tell, but the story that the guy talked about was his daughter was a certain character, and he was struggling getting her to go to bed, and she would fight and fight and fight, and she was a character that wanted control, who wanted to be a high D, it turned out, as the thing, someone who is very much their own person. And his friend of his was talking to him, and he said, well, have you ever had an assessment done of these? And they did the assessments of these three girls, and they're all very different. And this guy had said to him, he said, he'd said he was having trouble, and he said, you have trouble with her going to bed? Yeah, and just she always want to be in control of stuff, yeah, and all these different things. And kind of did the review of what was, and she came out that she's this kind of person. And this friend who knew that sort of thing said, well, have you tried asking her, giving her some timelines of when she goes to bed? Don't tell her when to go to bed, just say you can go to bed whenever you want, as long as it's between 6 and 8, or whatever, and 7 and 9. And he tried it, and he's a fantastic speaker, actually, the guy, Dr. Robert Rom. He's an American pastor, I think he was, and he's just very, very good orator, and he's just getting very excited about it. Remind me of Gary Shandling a little bit. So it was really, really entertaining watching him talk about this amazement that he had when he said to his daughter, you can go to bed when you want tonight, between then and then. And at 7 o'clock she went to bed. Way before the time that he would have wanted her to go to bed. But because she had control of when she needed to go, she would go when she wanted to. She wasn't being told. That's what made the difference. And you reminded me of that because of the characters of when I tell people to do it and they get on and do it. And again, it goes back to that previous conversation of, well, yeah, and then they come back and say, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? Because that's what they get. Because then that same person will complain about the fact I have to tell them what to do all the time.
Yeah. I've got a queue at my desk.
Yeah,
I don't have
the
any
rod
time.
from my own back.
I'm so busy. I use a story about a chap called Mo, a project manager that we've worked with, and he would complain about this queue at his desk, and you know there's loads and loads of people, and they're all bringing me problems to solve, you know, and so I've got all of these problems, I've got to sort them out in order to keep the project moving. So you know, if you could do one thing for me, sort the queue out at my desk, because I can't get any work done, and so we had a conversation about it, and we were chatting about it, and the recognition that by solving everyone's problems, what was happening was he was getting more problems to solve. So that was the first issue that he had. The second issue was that by solving everyone's problems, by becoming the expert on a particular topic, he actually was becoming a problem for the organisation because he was the only person that knew about it. And if he fell over, which was quite likely given the level of stress he was then under, if he fell over, he would actually take all that knowledge about those particular topics that he was solving. And then the third part of it was he was so busy solving all of these problems, he wasn't walking the floor anymore.
So he wasn't spotting
he wasn't out there.
Problems early.
Yeah. So it caused him 3 major problems. And it was down to him always solving everyone's problems. And eventually we managed to persuade him to take some time and listen to people and stop solving the problems but help them solve them for themselves. Which isn't always easy, I recognise that. And it took some time, but it made a real difference. And actually he ended up uncovering a major issue that was causing half of these problems to emerge. But it wasn't until he actually got out there and had the time to really uncover what was going on that he found that out.
Yeah, because you end up fixing symptoms. It's the symptoms and the cause scenario, isn't it? Because you see, it's quicker to do this, let's get that done. It's quicker to do that firefighting attitude.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I see it with project management, is quite often we get in that firefighting mode, and we, through sheer will of dragging the project over the thing, and we've all done it, and we all sit there going, if I'd actually sat back and took a little bit of short-term noise and pain on something, We might have avoided all the other stuff down there, and it's hard to do it because you think we just got to get this next. We'll get past this next milestone, and we're okay. We'll get past this next one, we're okay. And it's always that. Just get past that next one, and then we'll have some time to be able to sort out those problems. But as you say, that problem that's causing them is not being looked at, and it's always there then.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah. I think it is. And delegation is a hard, and it's kind of talking about delegation as a general thing of, and I talk about it in my book about the fact that, and I've done this myself, where someone comes to me and we need to say, if we need an Excel spreadsheet doing, I'm a failed accountant who was using Excel spreadsheets when he was 17. I spent 10 years doing it. I'm comfortable using them. I like using them. I'm in a happy place when I'm creating a nice fancy spreadsheet.
I'm smiling because I like a spreadsheet.
I know, it's very sad. And then I will go, right, okay, I could get someone else to do it. I could ask them to do it. I could watch them doing it while coaching them. It's like dragging nails down a blackboard normally when I watch someone else do it in a completely different way to the way I would do it. But
yes.
But I am guilty of not going, just you do it. And I'll grab in and I'll do it, and I'll be looking at the spreadsheets of our finance sheets and go, right, okay, we've got this problem on this number here, and someone's going, what? Where? And I'm not coach. Sometimes I'm not. Well, I know I'm not. I'm not coaching the guys to look at those reports in a way where they can go, that's a problem. What's the answer? And come to me going, here's the explanations. Before I've had, and there we go. Right, we've got that margin that looks weird, or we've got that looks unusual, and this is going to happen. But I'm the one spotting it, and then they're going, oh, we'll go and find out, and which is fine because then when we're prepping, and they're not reporting to me on these. I'm helping them prepare, and I've done that before all the time, and it's how you spend the time. They find the time to be able to learn and get to understand it, or whether you can automate it or get more tooling in. But then that takes cost and investment and time to work out whether you can do it.
Yeah.
It's always the same with that.
It is tough. Yeah. It is, and it's a really hard thing to do. As I've moved from being a sole trader and being a running coaching and facilitation and bringing in a bunch of associates and just me running the business and bringing in freelancers when I needed to moving into leading a team. And that has been a real shift for me personally, even though I teach this stuff. I ought to be really good at it, but it's hard. It's hard to get your fingers out the pie and go, oh, okay, you do it your way. I don't want to. Yeah. But that's a really tough thing to do.
It is, and
I think it's for everybody. When you care, it's hard to let go.
And that's the point, isn't it? Is you and you deliver a service, and you want to deliver it. And we talked about deliver a service to a level that actually you can't deliver to that level anymore, because there's never going to be someone working for you who cares as much as you and will do it exactly right for you. There will be people who will be damn close. You can get brilliant people, but there will always be something, and and that's the hard part, isn't it? And that's how going from sole trader to business person. And I've talked about my brother who's moved from working as a Harley mechanic, now runs his own business, and he's now had to change his mindset on what he's running a business now. He's not just working the spanners, he's running a business, and he thinks completely differently now to what he was thinking before. And it is something, and I think people, when they go from a contributor to a manager, find this a problem. When you go from contributor to project manager, or project manager to program or portfolio manager, as a being in there, in the detail of what's going on, and not having effective delegation tools, can cause you massive problems, I think.
And you often aren't taught how to do that,
No.
are you? And we're often not self-aware enough, or don't have the time to think about it and to think about how we could do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and again,
It's a tough
you
one.
firefight, you know, you're trying to get it done. You're trying to make sure it's right. You're trying to, sometimes it's hard working out why someone doesn't do stuff the same way you do. Why on earth would you do it that way? It's that whole thing. It's kind of, what? That's illogical. It's. We have the same thing with the dishwasher loading in our house. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
big
yeah,
issue.
exactly. I know. I don't do it now. But I have educated my eldest on how she's meant to load it. Most of the time, she does it right. I don't tell my wife. I prefer to keep my wife away from the dishwasher, and I definitely won't look after she's done it because I'm just pulling my hair out. I go all John Richardson. I know any of the UK listeners will have heard John Richardson going on about that. But it's a really good example of, well, to be honest, 90% of it's going to wash all right. There might be the odd thing that might be a bit weird, but actually, it's still going to bloody work. I'm just noticing we've just gone over an hour on our chat. Last time we spoke, we said we talked for a while, and I'm okay on my time. But what I think it's important because no, don't apologise to me. We haven't spoken except for in fleeting glances about this, which is it's the way that we kind of got introduced in many ways. So talk to me, I suppose. Why did you write it? What's nailed? And for you, why should someone buy it? Go on, why not?
Oh, brilliant. Well, first off, why did I write it? I was actually persuaded to write it. I never thought I would be somebody that would write a book. It's kind of really not me at all. And whilst I love reading books, I tend to get like a few chapters into them and then put them down. You know, I get a bit geeky about things, but then I don't actually finish them. So the idea of me writing a book and actually finishing a book was like massive. But I was persuaded that by some people, some of my clients actually, with whom I'd been using the framework, and they said, other people need to know about this. They really need to know about this. You've got to get it out there. And so that was kind of like, oh, okay, all right. And then it took me 3 years, because it's really hard writing a book.
I know. And these three,
and getting it from like 200,000 words to
these
35.
Three are really thin, skinny ones, and they took me ages. So yours it's got some really good content.
Do you know? Well, yeah. And it's got lots of pictures, which for me is really important. But it was one of those that when I originally wrote it, I kind of started putting all of this, reviews of other people's work in there. And I just simplified it down just to this nailed framework. And really, what we were talking about earlier with regard to creating psychological safety, with regard to changing cultures, and this piece about one conversation at a time. But how do you hold that conversation differently? And the framework was just a way of identified it as when I realised what we do when we're doing it well. So this isn't something brand new and something you've never heard of before, or something that's you're gonna go, oh wow, my world is completely rocked by this fantastic new idea. This is what you recognise it because it's what you do when you're doing it well. And all I've done is put that into a framework, into a simple framework, so that you can intentionally use it more often. And when you know you need to have a different kind of conversation, when you know you need to show up differently or respond differently, then you can give this a go. When you know you need to develop a relationship, you've got to work with this person, you need to smooth things through. How do you develop that relationship? How do you show that you care? And that's really what the framework is about.
Yeah, and
how do you do that stuff?
I'm kind of going to read out the sort of the highlights on there from that, because it's the notice, acknowledge, listen, explore, and do. And I know there's 5.5, stop and practice there, but that's the what you do that's what it stands for, isn't it? And it's I remember talking about it to you and having a look at this and thinking, it's that thing is, it's just like the active listening as the word kind of thing in there. It kind of hints at it, but doesn't quite make it as clear, does it? That notice, acknowledge that you noticed, and then listen, because then that listen is the bit there, isn't it? Because you might be listening, but do you listen, kind of thing? And it's kind of and then actually moving on to the next phases of it. It sounds, like you say, it sounds simple. That explore set phase of it, where you're questioning people on what to clarify what they mean.
Yeah.
Well, you do that, don't you? When someone says something and you go, "Oh, I don't know what they mean by that," you ask them the question, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
But sometimes we've not asked them the question. We've made an assumption of what they've said and not explored that next bit and gone, oh, you mean that? And we go back to those cards again, doesn't it? It's kind of having that way of that conversation, of being able to say,
or you dive into solution mode.
I'm a bugger for that.
That's the other thing is, you get, oh, right, okay, that's your problem. You know what you need to do? What you need to do is to go and run up a few mountains.
Have you been listening to me?
And people are like, it's the project managers in us. Give us a problem, we'll solve it really quickly. But that's, part of this is about slowing you down to that, so that when you do get to this solving the problems, you're solving the right problems. And that you're allowing other people to solve their own problems as well.
Yeah. So
that's the explore piece. Yeah.
Does it? I don't know. Yeah. I had this concept once, and I think this is when I suppose it's not the same. But when I was doing something at my best work, I thought with managing people and solving problems, so we had some very technical deliveries that would go on, and the one day, someone came to me, sat down, going, "We've got this problem." I said, "Well, explain it to me." And it was technical, and I said, "Well, just walk me through it." I've been in situations where people have walked me through the code, and I hadn't realised this until later, and they'll walk through the code, or they're walking through the problem, and they were walking through, and they were telling me, explain this, and then they got up and walked away. I was like, "Why are you going?" And then they kind of, "So I sorted it." And this happened more than once. And I kind of decided that I was the project dog. And all projects should have a dog. Because whilst they may not ask questions, they might tilt their head every so often when they find something a bit weird. They give you that sounding board. I'm that sounding board. And sometimes not saying something, and that, in some ways it's those first three pieces to me, read as the keeping shut. They can solve the problem before you need to ask questions. But then the questions occasionally then will elicit the answers, and then they'll walk off again. And quite often, as you say, you don't get to that point where you're a solutioneer. You're just that sounding board with that, as I say, the project dog that can then help people.
But the interesting thing when you use that phrase, project dog, the difference talking to a dog compared to, say, talking to a wall, is that the dog will notice you. It will acknowledge you, and it'll give you its attention, its full attention. So, my dog knows when, if we're upset or if we're angry, and every now and again we'll just come and put our nose and just acknowledge that we're not feeling great, or she'll sit and listen, and as you say, put your head on one side, almost going, "What? Tell me more." And those bits about noticing and acknowledging, and then making sure you do the listening, they're just so important, and they're all interwoven, because it's that expansion of what we notice, because we think that we notice everything, but we really don't. We're looking at the world through our little set of lenses, and so it's about how do we expand things.
And that's where the exploration comes next, doesn't it? When you can ask ask the stupid question. There's no stupid questions, but to ask the question that, from a uneducated point of view, the guys who worked for me were incredibly clever. They're incredibly bright, way brighter than me. But I can ask them questions that can help them solve their problems. I had people who would walk through the code and go, right, this bit does this. Right, what's that bit do? Well, after that's happened, this, oh, balls, I've missed a comma. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of the conversation you'd have. And you can't see it yourself until you explain it to someone else or talk to someone about it.
I coach very senior leaders of organisations that I have no idea what they do, and you know, very, very highly skilled teams, people who do stuff that they can't talk to me about, but I can still coach them, and or I can still coach that team, even though the stuff that they're talking about is way beyond me, because it's not about the content, it's about the process, it's about the listening, it's about what you're hearing for, it's about helping them hear themselves, and that's the bit that you're trying to do, and that's the bit you're describing there, is helping people hear themselves and solve their own problems.
Cool. So I think there's quite a compelling reason for people to buy the book. From my point of view, I think it's something we can all do. You look at project management, and at times it is very tough. I know, I've had it myself. It can be a tough and it can be a lonely place at times in project management. So anything that you can do to help improve those interactions with the team and get better with your team, I think it's fantastic. So I obviously it's a good way of grabbing it, and building teams is what we do, and we have to do them quickly.
And most projects, if they're going to fail, tend to fail on people.
Well, yeah, because
it tends to be to do with miscommunication or misunderstandings.
People deliver projects. Processes don't. Systems don't. It's people, and it's always about the people. It's every. I think Mark Horseman from the Manager Tools podcast. It's all about people, so it's all about communication. And that's everything to do with management. Oh,
unless you talk to a QS, unless you talk to a QS, in which case they'll tell you it's about the contract.
Yeah, but isn't the contract a piece of communication between two organisations? That if you're reading, you're in trouble already. Yeah. Unless it's a pair of you going, oh, I can't remember what we agreed. Let's check before we have an argument. Yeah. If you're already having an argument and digging it out to point at it, you're in trouble, aren't you? Yeah, you've already failed.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if people wanted to find out more about the Harrison Network, about the book, about you, what do they need to do? Where's the best ways to find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lucy Harrison, or the Harrison Network there. Website, harrisonnetwork.co.uk, you can find us on there. Or if you look at soft skills for tough jobs, you can buy it in all good bookstores, and also there's a page on the website all about it as well.
Cool.
So those are the best ways to get in touch.
I'll stick links in the show notes to all of that stuff. People can dive in on that. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's I think it's one of those, such a big area of conversation. You could talk about it for days. It's brilliant, and it's a thing that fascinates me. How we can do it better is just it's infinite, I think. So have a fantastic rest of your evening, and look after yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Nigel. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Lucy. I know I did. And come back next week. I have got Abdullah Al Mamoun, who is the CEO at the PMO Global Institute. So fascinating talk with him. So speak to you next week. Bye now. Wow, you made it this far. I'm guessing that you enjoyed the show if you have. Or maybe you've just left it playing in the background and forgot it was on. But if you did enjoy it and you're inclined to, I'd be delighted if you could share the show with your colleagues. It's discoverability with podcasts is quite difficult, especially with a niche one like this. But sharing with your colleagues and letting them have a chance to listen to these fantastic guests would be brilliant. If you've got time, a review on whatever platform you listen to it on would be great too, especially if it's a 5-star one. Again, that makes it easier for people to discover the show when they're searching on there, because the comments raise it up the old search engine optimization on all the different tools. If you are feeling flush, I have a couple of ways you could contribute. One is Patreon, Patreon/Sunday Lunch PM, and you can donate some money to the podcast that way, or you can jump along to my website, nigelcreaser.com, www.nigelcreaser.com, and click on the link to the shop, and in there you've got all my books that I've created in the varying different guises, a number of different ways you can grab a copy of those. And down the bottom I've got the my guests' books, so everyone who's been on here, if they've had a book, I've got a link to their book in there, and Amazon give me a little bit back for when someone buys from them. But more importantly, if you come back next time and listen, I'll be delighted. So I'll leave you alone and let you get on with your day now. Thank you. Bye.
Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.